Hi, welcome to WION special broadcast at 8 p.m. with me, Sana Khan. Tonight, we pick up a crucial issue, an issue that's close to each one of our viewers' heart and is playing on their minds in a big way. It all centers around the Supreme Court hearings on the Aadhar matter. Now, it must be pointed that the right to privacy is mostly understood as against other citizens or private bodies. For example, the right to privacy of a celebrity against tabloids which are publishing their pictures, or the rights of a Facebook user over the data they give to the company. However, in this case, the issue relates to the rights of Indian citizens that they have against their own government. Well, lots to talk about the subject. What is right to privacy? Should it be a fundamental right? We have statistics, surveys, experts on the show, and a reaction from across the country from ordinary citizens on how they look at right to privacy. But first up, take a look at this report to know why the Aadhar scheme could put our privacy at risk and why all of this matters. The centre's move to make Aadhar mandatory for all Indian citizens has triggered another debate. Does it violate the right to privacy? Some activists and citizens groups say it most definitely does, although the government insists that by making Aadhar mandatory, it only wants to fix loopholes in the way public welfare schemes are accessed by people. While a 9-judge bench of the Supreme Court is hearing arguments, in past rulings, it has laid down that the right to privacy is not absolute. But activists and others have petitioned the court that the right to privacy is embedded in the right to liberty guaranteed by the Constitution. While the lawyers debate and dissimulate, the issue has thrown up some interesting points. People have no problem sharing personal details with online service providers, or for that matter with foreign governments to get a visa. But the key element here is choice. People decide by their own free will about sharing personal details. The problem with Aadhar is it is mandatory. The individual has no choice here. Activists say Aadhar is like a bridge sharing the individual's details with a host of different entities like banks or airlines. Where personal information existed in silos, it is now available to all through Aadhar. The Unique Identification Authority, which runs Aadhar, says its data is secured to the highest standards, but critics say there is a centralized database for Aadhar and one hacking incident could inflict unimaginable damage, including identity theft and compromised bank accounts. This is the reality of the digital age. Bureau Report, WION. All right, now we'll get some expert reactions. Joining me on the show is Colonel Matthew Thomas. He is a retired Army officer and one of the very first petitioners in the Aadhar case. Thanks so much, Colonel Thomas, for joining us here on the show. My first question to you is, and it's a very basic question, when I give out my personal details, my retina scan, my particulars, my fingerprints, is it a violation of my right to privacy? How would you see that?
Thank you very much for inviting me on the show. I'm grateful. It certainly is a violation of my privacy. They're intruding onto my bodily integrity. The right to privacy is not just about somebody entering your home. It is about your body. This is far worse than a seizure in your home, search and seizure.
Colonel Matthew, at this point, I want to come in and also ask you, when I go to get a visa, let's say for traveling to the United States, it's the same procedure. I give my fingerprints, I give my, other very, very, guarded particulars, whether it be my age, my, other details, so to speak. So why is it, we talked about in our report, it's a matter of choice. So why is it that one feels secure while doing that and not when it comes to the Aadhar?
When we go to a doctor and share intimate details about our condition, a physical condition or psychological condition, we are not worried. Why are we? We're doing it voluntarily for some benefit. And similarly, when you travel voluntarily. You're going there for a purpose. They have their rules. If you go to America, you have to drive on the right, not on the left. You don't have a choice. But you're going there voluntarily. This is not that. This is something far more dangerous. We are in something like a digital emergency. where the state or the government is taking all your data and linking it to everything else. When you buy an air ticket, a rail ticket, a ration card, a passport, a scholarship, whatever you do, they're all being compulsorily taken. It started as voluntary, now it is mandatory, and it's everywhere. Whatever you do, they want your data, and that's ridiculous.
All right. In fact, do stay with me. It's important to look over here at some of the basics before we go further ahead. For example, what is right to privacy? And in fact, why is it so key in the Aadhar debate? In fact, if I can quickly go across to my colleague, Ankit Tuteja, with regard to this, he will explain to our viewers what this is all about. Over to you, Ankit.
Well, thanks, Anna. You know, the right to privacy debate has resurfaced once again, but this time after the government has decided to actually make Aadhar mandatory for all the citizens of India. But I need to ask one thing here right now. Don't we actually comply by the government rules? Aren't we the law-abiding citizens right now? But the thing is, when all of it comes at the cost of your personal details, when the right to privacy is at risk, how fair is it to actually have all the details shared with the government? And to understand, we have a couple of things that I want to share with all of you. What is right to privacy? Right to privacy, not a fundamental right. As we all know, it's not clearly listed in our Indian Constitution. Right to privacy is not a fundamental right. But at the same time, we need to understand, when we are born, we have the right to life and liberty. It's our natural rights. And the right to privacy is embedded in the right to liberty. Right to privacy inseparable from right to liberty. So we just need to understand that right to privacy might not be enlisted in the Indian Constitution, but it's clearly embedded in the right to liberty. And once again, the debate has resurfaced once again. Petitioners are saying that the right to privacy should not be compromised, while the centre is of the opinion that the Aadhar card is compulsory and all the Indian citizens need to have Aadhar number, which means that you need to share all your biometrics data with the government. Privacy embedded in liberty and dignity, as I just mentioned, it may not be part of the Indian Constitution, it may not be clearly listed, but again, it's inseparable, it's embedded in your liberty and dignity. And moving on to the next graphic. And before we understand that why is privacy key in Aadhar debate, we need to understand a couple of things, that why it has become a debatable issue after, say, 55 years. It was back in 1954 and again in 1962 when Supreme Court actually ruled that right to privacy is not a fundamental right. But again, after 55 years, this debate has resurfaced, and now petitioners and of course a lot of Indian citizens are of the opinion that the right to privacy should not be compromised in any which manner. What is right? Why is privacy key in Aadhar debate? Data security and data breach. This might look just data security and data breach, but we need to understand one thing very clearly. When you talk about Aadhar, you shared your biometrics data, and all those data that you share with the government are stored in a centralized space. And if that centralized space is compromised, your financial details, your banking details, your personal details, your identity fraud, your identity theft, all and everything is at risk. Now, a lot of people are of the opinion that, right to privacy is an elitist concern. But the fact here is, it's not an elitist concern, it's a concern that should actually matter all of us. Because identity theft or fraud, for example, when you go for visa, you give your biometrics data, you're logged into Gmail, you have accounts on a lot of online services, you share all your data, you don't mind. But the point is, you have a choice over there, you have a will. That's up to you. You have that choice to share or not to share your data with either government agencies or any private player out there in the market. But when that thing is made compulsory, when you are legally bound to share that thing, that is when your right to choice as well as right to privacy is compromised, is at risk. Financial details at risk. Now what happens when you share details with travel, say airlines, with banks, and for that matter with online players out there? Those details are there in different silos. But Aadhar, which is a unique identity number, bridges all those data and actually can give access to hackers with the help of that one number. So in case, if a hacker hacks into that centralized data, your biometric data, all of your personal details are at the risk, they are vulnerable and they can be compromised very easily. While UIDAI is saying that they are secure and protected by highest standards. But the fact is that given that we have all the data stored online and hackers are using different hacking techniques to actually hack into databases, we are actually at the risk of compromising our data integrity. And we actually WION spoke to a lot of people out there in the country, and what you have to say here is that we spoke to people in Bombay and Bangalore. Take a look at what they have to say, how they are responding to the right to privacy debate.
Well, to me, right to privacy is very important. But on the other hand, this whole linking of Aadhar card and PAN card, that is, at least I believe that is important too. But what happened a few months back where Sakshi Dhoni had flagged that Mahendra Singh Dhoni's Aadhar card details were public, if that's not the case, if my private information is not out in public, I don't have any problem with sharing my private information with the government, as long as it is for a good reason.
As my privacy is concerned, I don't want to disclose my personal information in front of other people's. So as per the privacy is concerned, I am not supporting for this particular opinion which government has taken place.
So it is very important. It is as good as we respect our fundamental rights. Every citizen has its own privacy, and we need that government should respect it.
It's very important because you don't want to be accessed by any other person you don't know. Because you don't know how much of information they'll be using of yours, which you want to keep it safe from everybody. So it's not very safe unless they're very sure that the entire system is very secure. I think they should take more concerns about making the system more secure rather than just forcing us to do all these things. First make their system secure and then ask us to do something about it.
A lot of government employees only who have a lot of property which is not known, it comes into light. And that way a good amount of good resource planning can be done. So government can look in, and it will also help in fighting corruption in some manner.
I think privacy is important as long as it doesn't affect the public policies in general. Like, you will be allowed your right to privacy as long as the government can keep track of certain things that you're doing, which is going to affect the nation as a whole. So to some extent your privacy can be mapped by the government, but not to an extent that it affects your personal details, which is not relevant to be in the public sphere. The government gets to know about it. I mean, as long as it's going to remain in a secure condition, like nobody else can get to misuse it, I'm okay with it.
I think it's a fundamental right to every citizen, and we fought so hard for our privacy, for our freedom, and to see that another government the government is taking charge of it. I mean, there must be some good valid reason as to why they need our details, but I, as a citizen, not very safe. I don't feel really safe or secure about sharing my details to someone else.
All right, in fact, joining me on the show is also Mr. Pavan Duggal. He's a cyber law expert. Thanks so much, Mr. Duggal, for joining us here on the show. Now, as we talk further, discuss this issue, for decades, the Supreme Court has ruled that the right to privacy is not a fundamental right. But look at today's day and age, it's all digitized. All the information, every time one has to feed when you go online, whether it be transacting online or doing anything. So what does one do in this scenario? And especially when we've had cases of data breach in the recent past, not just in India, it happens across the world.
Well, one thing is very clear, that very quickly we have to legally recognize the factum that people have a legitimate, genuine expectation of privacy. In this digital space, where everybody's got their own different kinds of personal and private and not so personal data up there, there's an expectation for twin kind of privacy. One is for data privacy and one is for personal privacy. But I believe that the entire issue of privacy has to be seen from an overall context of cyber security of the cyberspace ecosystem. How secure the ecosystem is will ultimately determine how much privacy can I actually have. And at a time when a majority of the people are completely careless of how they'll end up sharing their own personal information with large number of intermediaries, I think the time has come for us to legally recognize that yes, privacy will have to be an integral component of modern day existence. However, in the context of Aadhar per se, we'll have to do a balancing act. The national interest cannot be subjugated to the right to privacy. At the same time, we'll have to ensure that there's a harmonious balance. But it's a very interesting event how this entire jurisprudence is evolving with the passage of time.
Right. In fact, Colonel Matthew Thomas is also with us, Mr. Duggal. Colonel Matthew, you know, we've read reports about the foreign intervention when it comes to data collected by the UIDAI, and we hear that 20 crore rupees each contract was given to 3 different, US-based, biometric solution providers, and they have their contracts with US, French, and in fact other intelligence agencies, even British intelligence agencies. So what does that mean for somebody who goes out and gives their particulars? Do they actually get to believe that the data is safe and it will not be misused?
Thank you. I am astonished that this has happened. The contract of UIDAI with 3 companies, L1 Identity Solutions, Satya Mahindra Morpho, and Accenture. These contracts provide for sharing or handing over all data to these private companies. Now, companies like L1 Identity Solutions, now called Morpho Trust, have contracts with the US intelligence agency. Similarly, the French company. Now, I'm least worried about data breach. When you're handing over the entire data to foreign companies in league with foreign intelligence agencies, data breach makes no sense at all. And not only is the data being handed over, contractually, under clause 3.1 of Annexure B of the contract, they are allowed to collect further information and data. They can use, store, transfer, process, and link it to a specific individual. In other words, the contract permits them to completely use it. And somebody said that the so-called Aadhar can be used by corruption. It cannot. Not only that, it's dangerous because illegal immigrants and militants have access to it.
Absolutely. In fact, that is one of the key concerns over here. There are many points for and against it. Should there be a centralized database of all this kind of information, very personal information, and also, on the other hand, the threats that surround it? I'd request both of my guests to please stay with me. It's over to Ankit once again to understand how it works, the right to privacy in various countries across the world. Ankit?
Well, we have seen and understood that where India stands when it comes to matters related to right to privacy. It's very important to understand now that where the world stands when it comes to matters related to personal details and right to privacy, because we often cite the West when it comes to matters concerning digital and digitization. So let's take a look at where the world stands when it comes to right to privacy. So no one should be subjected to arbitrary interference with privacy, family or home. This is Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that no one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with privacy, family or home. So it clearly says that privacy is important, it should be respected and it should be kept intact. And let's see what other countries and what other conventions have to say on that. Moving on to the next. No interference by a public authority except in the interest of national security, public safety or economic well-being of country. This is what European Convention on Human Rights has to say. And if you look at it, no interference by a public authority. The first line in itself is a clear reflector of how the European Convention on Human Rights looks at when it comes to matters related to rights to privacy. Let's take a look at what the USA and UK have to say on this. Department of State tries to restrict information collection and has to comply with federal status and guidance. This is what USA has to say. And when it comes to matters related to digitization, we often refer to the take that US takes. If it was net neutrality, we often cited US as an example. So we can take a leap from here that what the US has to say on this. Moving on to what the UK has to say on right to privacy. And we just saw what the US has to say, and we cannot afford to not have a look at what the neighboring country has to say on this. Taking a look at what the Pakistan has to say on this, country's operational legal framework does little to protect a citizen's right to privacy. So when it comes to Asia, when it comes to South Asia, we have to understand that right to privacy is important and it should be respected. It's time that India needs to actually take a different opinion on how privacy should be taken a look at. Okay, so we just took a look at how people in Mumbai and Bangalore reacted to right to privacy. Let's take a look at how people in Chennai are responding to matters related to personal details and right to privacy.
I feel it's okay for all of us if it is for our well-being and our protection, our safety, then I feel that it's required. And it should not, the data should not be misused. Yeah, that's what I feel.
Looking into the security, what we have facing are problems like crimes and which are happening. So government should have a total control of our personal documents, which they can track us through our Aadhar card, like if we are paying the taxes and on a regular basis, and our fingerprints, it could be checked anytime wherever the person is going and all. So I don't think so this Aadhar, if it is absolutely okay if government is keeping a track on this.
Regarding Aadhar card, it is very much flexible enough. Like if we include the PAN card details, like PAN details and all in Aadhar card, it will be like more like for common people it will be very good. Like many people don't pay tax and all. Like people who don't have Aadhar card, they don't pay tax. Who will be running a transport business, they don't pay tax. If they include their PAN details in Aadhar card, it will be like good enough for the government also.
Well, it's interesting what people have to say. Many people agree that their right to privacy should be absolute and it should be a fundamental right in a way and should be recognized as well in the Indian Constitution. Coming to you, Mr. Duggal, we were going through some data and we came across this, record. 28% of records that were maintained by various sectors across the world, 28% of government record data was breached, and this is last year's statistics. In such a scenario, how can one trust any body, be it the government or other sectors, with this kind of information? That's a huge, huge concern.
You're bang on target. The fact remains is that today you cannot just trust anyone, whether it's any private sector, whether even it's the government, primarily because you today do not exactly know which state or non-state actor is targeting you. You think you are a lamer person, you are a non-celebrity, you have nothing much to gain or lose. If somebody snoops upon you, you are mistaken. Just about today, everyone is on target. And the reason is very simple. Today, we are all in a data economy. Therefore, we have become data subjects. And a variety of state and non-state actors are continuously concerned of what kind of data are we generating. Primarily because we have become global broadcasters of data, global transmitters of data, and global authors of data. In that context, states and non-state actors are concerned as to the data that we are generating, how far is that going to impact societal or other people's behavior. In that context, surveillance, interception, monitoring, decryption, these are various tools of legitimate governance which are invariably targeted against the individual person. But then today there's nothing known as absolute security.
Right.
In fact, cyber security gets continuously breached. In India, we are sitting on the cusp of disaster because with Aadhar now, so much of cyber security breaches happening and the architecture not being ready. I think we are just.
But Mr. Duggal, it's not just about the Aadhar. One tends to share details online every other, at every other instance. It's not just about Aadhar. So the need of the hour perhaps is laws, but we have laws in other countries and data is still breached. So the debate really is open. Very quickly, let me bring out some poll figures over here for our viewers that have taken place recently. In fact, an NGO, Local Circles, they've polled more than 9,000 citizens in June this year on whether India needs a privacy law to prevent organizations, private or public, from accessing information on individuals without their written authorization. The survey threw up some interesting responses. Take a look. In fact, 86% of those polled were in favor of a law to protect private information. Only 9% people said there was no need for a law, and 5% people had no comment to make. So what kind of information do people want to be protected? The survey by the same agency drew the following results. What details should be private? 42% said salary details, performance ratings at work and mobile phone usage details should be kept private. 10% of people wanted only iris or retina fingerprint scan and DNA information to be private, interestingly, and 14% also wanted to include Aadhar, PAN card, passport, voter ID and date of birth. Another 17% said bank accounts including debit and credit card details, income tax returns and medical records should be kept private. Now, it's interesting over here, Colonel Matthew, if I may come to you, should the government then, when there is such high degree of skepticism, 86% of the respondents say that most of the details should be kept private, should it come up with more secure laws? We know Aadhar scheme has been faulty. Thousands of centres which were known to commit fraud at the time of Aadhar enrolment, they were shut down. So what sort of assurance can the government then give to citizens who are sceptical?
Thank you, Sana. Before I answer that question, I just want to make one statement, and that is when the UK government, the present Prime Minister was then Home Secretary, and when she moved the bill in the UK Parliament to scrap the National ID Card Act, there, she used certain words. She said the card is it's an assault on personal liberties.
Right.
This is what she said. So we should understand what it means. Now, as far as privacy is concerned, we are party to the UN Declaration on Privacy, and there has, apart from what Ankit said, one more clause: your correspondence, whether it's digital or that's also private. Other thing which I want to tell you is Pakistan and India are the two countries which are using the same companies. Now, I want to ask one question to your audience and to all of you. What kind of law or what system can protect you when the government is handing over the entire data to private foreign companies? This is the copy of the contract, which is filed by me in the Supreme Court. So what kind of protection can we have from the government when they are handing over the entire data or doing whatever you want?
Okay. Colonel Matthew, that's a valid question. Mr. Duggal, closing comments now. In case one was to carry out the UIDAI scheme at this point, enroll, on the Aadhar scheme, in case the government was to give somebody an assurance, all citizens, that their data is perfectly secure, which actually seems unbelievable at this point. It's hard to believe that. Will then people be more forthcoming as far as sharing their personal details is concerned? Having said that, also keeping in mind that that is something which is, next to unachievable, looking at the data, statistics of data breach in other countries across the world.
No government can actually give a promise to its citizens that all the data that the citizens have given to the government is absolutely secure from all kinds of cybersecurity breaches. In fact, in the context of Aadhar, we are now beginning to see a bleeding of the Aadhar ecosystem happening, because there are every week new disclosures of how Aadhar numbers are being constantly breached. So in a scenario where the Aadhar ecosystem has developed by the government insisting on making Aadhar mandatory without having done its homework on protecting the cyber security of the Aadhar ecosystem, it's well nigh impossible for the government even to promise that the Aadhar database in the Aadhar ecosystem will continue to be safe. In that context, I think people need to be very, very careful about their privacy. They need to be extremely conscious and duly diligent before they start sharing any kinds of information, including sensitive personal data or biometric information with any entity.
I think no one would disagree with that. It's been an absolute pleasure having you, Colonel Matthew Thomas and Mr. Pavan Duggal on the show. This issue is very, very important, and that's what we at WION are trying to highlight. Thanks, gentlemen, for joining me here on the show. So no denying the fact that this is a huge debate, and what the Supreme Court observes could have massive ramifications in case it comes out and says that it is right to privacy is or should be a fundamental right. We at WION will be tracking these developments very, very closely. Time for me to wrap up this edition. This is me, Sana Khan, signing off. Stay tuned for more news and updates here on WION.